This is Eli White,
Willie Calhoun,
Dane Dunning,
Nick Solak, this is Isaiah Kiner-Flefa.
This is Chris Woodward,
Glenn Otto. This is Taylor Hearn with the Texas Rangers, and you listen to the Texas Rangers Fanatic Podcast with Alex Plink.
Alex Plink.
With Alex Plink. With Alex Plink.
with Alex Plank.
With Alex Plink.
With Alex Plink.
And Alex Plink.
What's going on, Rangers Nation? It's Alex Plink with Dallas Sports Fanatic, and this is the Texas Rangers Fanatic Podcast, episode 32. Lips are sealed. I don't know. I mean, what? I don't even know what to call this. Lockdown? I have no idea. Basically, there's nothing going on the past 3 days. And then to tell me about stuff that happened before nothing was going on, I've got Mr. Chris Halicke from Sports Illustrated. Chris, thank you so much for joining.
No problem, man. I'm glad to be on here to talk about the whirlwind of everything that happened before the lockout, and then since the lockout started, like almost nothing happening. Like it's just been quiet.
Are you enjoying your vacation? Sort of. I don't even know. Is this even a vacation? I mean, it's interesting because at this point, if you think about if we were in a regular off season, December 7th. You know, I'm sure there's not too much that's happening.
Well, actually, this week would have been the winter meetings. So, like, if nothing would have happened, if there were no lockout, if there were no CBA negotiation to have to deal with, I would be running around like crazy around a hotel like crazy, meeting with agents or whoever at the winter meetings right now. So
you did all that running around last week.
Yeah, I did all the running around last week. You know, we had the big day in Arlington, on December 1st, which was, right before the lockout, and jamming 4 press conferences in one day. And just a huge shout out real quick to John Blake and the rest of the Rangers media department or media relations department for handling that. That was I cannot imagine having to worry about hosting 4 press conferences in one day
on short notice.
Yeah, it's just a huge shout out to them for them getting that done and giving us the access that we had that day, because that was obviously going to be really, really huge for the days leading into the lockout. And now there's no end in sight at this point. Could be next week, could be next month, could be 3 months. I mean, it could be whenever. I don't know. This is just work stoppages suck. There's no way around it.
Let's get into that first, because if my calendar is correct, spring training is scheduled for February 26th. So that would be the first official spring training game. Rangers Royals at Surprise. We are here on December 7th. I guess the question that a lot of people are wondering is, will there be an agreement by that date? Will spring training start on time? Will opening days start on time?
So I'm generally an optimistic person, so I want to preface that. But even then, most people I've talked to still believe that the season will start on time, that the games will, and even if the season doesn't start on time, that games won't be lost at this point. That's the most important thing. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be a work stoppage, but in a perfect situation, since we already have a work stoppage, is they get a deal done in enough time so that spring training is not impacted, and they have the full, I think it's usually 6 weeks from the time the pitchers and catchers report to the time spring training ends. They have that full window so that it's a normal spring training. Players don't have to worry about, risking injury, or especially pitchers, not having to get ramped up too quickly. Hitters have time to get their timing down and go through their process. Hopefully that happens. I'm not as optimistic about that. I think right now a good barometer for getting a deal done is around February 1st, or the first week of February. If they get something done by then, I still think you can have a full spring training. Maybe you have to cut it by maybe a week, maybe that first week of pitchers and catchers reporting, and then full squad workouts and things like that. Maybe that gets kind of cut down a little bit, or maybe they take away 1 week of Cactus League games, which, again, if they're going to cut down anything, they're going to cut down something that doesn't require losing games, because even losing spring training games is lost revenue, and lost revenue means bad things like that. Owners don't want that. Players don't want that. Anything that they can do to salvage. And I think that's ultimately why you may see a lot of mudslinging in December and maybe even the beginning part of January. But then I think when we start getting closer to February, you're going to start seeing somebody budge in this game of chicken. And somebody's going to budge because ultimately neither side wants to lose money.
Exactly.
That's the optimistic part of me. Then again, the players could just be, because I know the players are fighting for change, and the players could just be like, we're not budging on anything. And then if the owners just out of spite don't want to budge just because they don't want just because they know the players aren't going to budge, then you have two sides in a gridlock, and then really bad things can happen. And, as a fan of hockey, I've seen something like that happen to the 2004-2005 season where the entire season was canceled because of a lockout. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I still think we have a full season, but it could go anywhere. So I think first week of February is a good barometer for seeing if spring training gets condensed. The time to hit the panic button is if they don't have something done by the beginning of March. If first week of March comes and there was no agreement, that's the time to start really hitting the panic button. I'm like, okay, is the season going to start on time? Are we going to have a full season? Like that's the time to start, getting really, really concerned.
I think to your point, if there's a delay into the season, you lose money. Who does that benefit? That doesn't benefit anybody.
It doesn't benefit
So
anybody.
why wouldn't you at that point, whether it's early, like you said, barometer, early February, come into an agreement and say, hey, let's just come to a compromise. And, if you do have to cancel or, if you do lose a week worth, you can always schedule inter-squad games. I would assume that would be an option.
Yeah, you could. I mean, teams could do. If you see a condensed spring training, it could be a lot like. So I think we even wrote about this on the site whenever we're talking about like different scenarios. So like in 1990, like during the owners lock out the players, like I think it was like the week before camps were supposed to open up, and 32 days later they were able to strike an agreement, and they had a truncated spring training, like a 3-week spring training. So you could see something like that happen. Like, okay, if they don't get something done until like, let's say like March 1st, somehow they get a deal done. And then like you have like a week or maybe 2 weeks of just utter free agent frenzy, because you still have a lot of free agents on the market right now, and that market's just frozen until the lockout's over. And so you could have a 2-week period where free agents can sign, and then you have 3 weeks of what we witnessed as like spring training 2.0 in 2020. Only you would still be able to play teams in the Cactus League or the Grapefruit League, whether you train in Arizona or Florida, and then you'd probably have to delay the season by about a week and a half or so. Like that happened in 1990. Like they delayed the season by a week, but they didn't lose any games. So you could see a situation like that happen, and you still have a full 162 game season. Yeah, it doesn't start on time. You want it to start on time, but at least you don't lose any games, and that's the most important thing. So that could be a situation. So that's what I'm saying. If you don't have an agreement by the first week in March, that's the time to start hitting the panic button, because then you're like, okay, now they might have to actually start carving into, because they can't have the season go too long. It's the same situation with why owners didn't want the season going too long. They didn't want it going, too
in
late
2020.
into November, because they have it set like the postseason has to start by a certain time so that the World Series can end by a certain time, so that it doesn't impact future seasons. And I get that. I understand that. And the OCD part of me says, absolutely, I 100% agree with that. The World Series should be over around Halloween, maybe a few days into November. Like that's when the World Series should be over. And then start the off season. So, but it's a lockout, and unprecedented things happen sometimes.
You can also, and I don't know if they could do this, if you have to add more split squad games too.
Yeah.
I know they're probably weary about that, but that might be something that all teams would have to agree on. But that could be, if you're adding maybe 1 or 2 split squad days.
It's an unprecedented time, man. It's an unprecedented time. They would have to get creative on how to. Let's see. That's
you guys ready.
And see, that's the other thing is that, okay, if you get something done by February 1st, you don't have to worry about losing anything more than likely. Yep. All you have to worry about is negotiating the issues that you have to negotiate now, which obviously you have core economic issues. You have, when is arbitration going to start? How do you handle arbitration? How do you handle player like minimum salaries? How do you handle free agency? Like all the core stuff, and then all the other stuff like universal DH, expanded playoffs, all that kind of stuff. Work out. You still have time to work out all that. The further you go toward March, and then now you have to start worrying about negotiating a restart plan, which we saw how well that went in 2020. So like that, it's just, you're talking about like making an already crappy situation, for lack of a better term, and making it more crappy. So it just get a deal done as fast as possible. The fact that they haven't even negotiated, I mean, we're recording this on December 7th. It's been like 5 days since the lockout officially started, and they haven't gone back to the bargaining. Yeah, they haven't gone back to the bargaining table yet. And it's like, what are y'all waiting for? Like, I understand, like, you can't negotiate every single day. I get it. But there's time. This is time wasted, in my opinion. Like, I'm not saying that because I want to get back to work, and, just, this is not good for the game. Try to get this done as fast as possible. Like, if you're waiting for tensions to die down or whatever, okay, then maybe, I'm not a negotiator. I'm not a lawyer. Like, I don't, understand the fine workings of this, but in my opinion, get talking, get moving. And talks can't be a bad thing. Like, well, I guess it can, but for the most part, talks can't be a bad thing, because at least you know where you are. Even if you're still far apart, at least you still know that and know what issues you have to tackle. So
it's like when you have kids that don't want to speak to each other, and you almost have to be like, okay, get into a room and talk it out.
Not there yet. Right now.
Did I use a little dad analogy there?
Yeah, but I mean, my kids are 5 and 3, so right now it's just getting them to separate, because right now it's like they go at it too much. Now, right now I can't get them to stop fighting sometimes, and so you're just trying to be peacemaker and try to get in the middle and be like, okay, especially with the older one, because the older one obviously understands. They understand a little bit better of like,
the older one sometimes tries to take advantage of the younger one. I'm just gonna say that as a younger sibling myself.
There's always my wife was a younger sibling, so she understands that. And like I'm a younger sibling too, but I mean, I didn't even live with my half brother until I was 9, so it's a completely different dynamic with me. But yeah, so
watch out. But no, I definitely seeing it there is that at this point, like, again, if your target is to have everything, and I would assume that nobody wants to sit there and be like, oh yeah, let's just delay everything, because there's nothing gained to that.
Yeah,
why not start as early as you can, and then you have more time to work out the nitty-gritty details, and then nothing is delayed.
I mean, just my initial hunch on this, my initial gut feeling is that it's going to take one side to have to just budge on one thing that they really don't want to budge on. And I think once that happens, I think you start to see the
dominoes
effect.
Will fall.
Yeah, I think. I don't want to say, because if it were just one major issue that these two were trying to solve, it seems like, okay, it's just a matter of time before that one issue, they agree on that one issue, and then everything else falls in line. They've got like 3 or 4 main issues, and that's the issue there, is that they've got to decide. They got to come to an agreement on free agency. They got to come to an agreement on arbitration. They've got to come to an agreement on a revenue sharing. Like that's a big thing, because right now the players want to take away $100 million from the way owners from the pool that owners split in revenue sharing, because they want to punish teams that are constantly tanking. And the way the league sees it is that that's just adding fuel to the fire. That's just pouring gas on the fire of being like, okay, now you're taking teams that are already struggling and taking more money away from them, and like they need that money. And so it's you get 2 different views on how on how teams are tanking, and that's a big so you've got a bunch of issues here that they are far apart on. There's a bunch of other issues that I think once those are all solved will all fall in line, things like the universal DH, expanded playoffs, even league minimum salaries. Like I think that is something that they're a lot closer on than like free agency, arbitration, and revenue sharing. Like those are the core 3 issues.
Yeah.
And Tom Verducci did a great job outlining those on Sports Illustrated, and I highly recommend anybody go to read that, because he's obviously been in the game for a long time and has seen this happen, You witnessed the 94-95 strike. I was a kid when that happened.
I was 3 years old.
So
Sorry.
I was see 94. I was 7 years old when that strike started. So like I was old enough to remember it. But definitely, I don't remember it in detail like it would have like if I were a teenager or if I were a young adult, like when that happened. So yeah.
No,
It was not fun. It was terrible for baseball. And I can tell you that I was definitely old enough to remember how much I loved baseball before and then how much longer it took for me to get back to loving baseball again. It wasn't until the McGuire Sosa home run chase in 98 where I started to really love baseball again. And
I remember that, and being a family that lives in Chicago, witnessing that, especially on the Sosa side. And it's so much different when you look back 27 years ago to the 94 strike and to nowadays, because honestly, if there happens to be a year lockout, I mean, you ask fans, like, yeah, sure, they'll miss baseball, but they got other stuff. There's so much more. There's so many more sports available nowadays. There's so many more outside activities to do nowadays that honestly, if baseball goes away for a year, it'll
be even the 94-95 strike didn't see something like that happen. And right. I mean, yeah, you had the cancellation of the postseason in the World Series, and that was what was really awful about it. Yeah. And even then the 95 season was affected by it as well, but you didn't have an entire season canceled. And honestly, look how long. Okay, so let's learn from hockey.
Yes,
because right now, this is the first season that I can remember where hockey has had an agreement with ESPN since they had that lockout in 04-05, and here we are. It's 2021, and now hockey is more accessible for. I mean, there's millions of people that have a subscription to ESPN Plus.
And you can watch pretty much every game.
Yeah, you can watch. Yeah, there's a slate of games that you can watch every single. I've been able to watch more Penguins games than I have been able to, like. I mean, unless I'm paying for NHL Center Ice or NHL.TV, whatever it's called now. And but now so many different fans who may be casual fans or may have thought, I've always kind of wanted to watch hockey, but now I can watch whatever game I want. Oh, could this Connor McDavid guy? Maybe I want to watch him a little bit more often. Or is Sidney Crosby, like Alex Ovechkin is, there's potential that Alex Ovechkin could possibly catch Wayne Gretzky's goal record, not this season, but Wayne Gretzky's goal record, like career goal record. Like now people want to start maybe wanting to watch that and getting a little more interested in things like that. It's more accessible than it ever has been, but look how long it took for hockey to get back on an ESPN platform. I mean, it took, 04-05. That was, 17 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. That's a long time just to be able to get back in ESPN's good graces. I mean, it's a bad look for the sport if you have any kind of delay or shortened season because of a lockout, and God forbid an entire season loss. That would be, I don't think MLB would be able to really recover because it's already struggling to try to keep up. I understand revenue, like they're the second highest grossing league in the world. I get it. Money's great and everything, but in terms of actual relevance in the culture, MLB is far behind the National Football League and even in my opinion behind the NBA. So like you've got and NHL and even Premier League, you get more and more people talking about watching the Premier League. You're getting NHL and Premier League fans on the rise. And something like baseball has a lockout. You're telling me people won't go watch the Premier League instead or watch NHL instead? Come on, man. Like this, it's awful for the game of baseball if they have anything that cuts into the season, anything.
I think the only real group that would highly, not really bad, it would deteriorate from there is, of course, the networks that have invested all the money this year. But I mean, to your point, outside of that, as a fan, really from a sports standpoint, you're looking at mid-June and July as the 2 months that really baseball is the centerpiece as you go into football training camp. Because once August and you get preseason games in the NFL, I mean, those have high viewership.
I mean, even then, the Stanley Cup final and the NBA finals both happen in June.
Yep.
So like really baseball has this window of like like you said, from about mid-June. So it's like as soon as the NBA finals are over, because those usually are
Yeah,
just,
Stanley Cup will finish beforehand.
yeah, just after the Stanley Cup. So you have like this 3 to 4 week window where baseball is the centerpiece, where nothing else major is going on. And like that usually is like, and usually like the week after the All-Star break, NFL training camps start opening. And it's like, then you have to start competing with the NFL. And so, yeah, baseball just needs to just get it done. Like you don't have to get it done tomorrow, but get it done. 2 months is not a long time to try to get this done. And we all could be, looking back on this in February and being like, oh, why were we worrying so much about it? Well, it's because we don't want to see the game of baseball take a gigantic step backwards or just shoot itself in the foot completely. We just want to see the game thrive. I feel like the game is trending upwards again. Finally, you're starting to have more international superstars become the centerpiece, and MLB was better. They're still not where they need to be, but they're better about being able to market Shohei Ohtani and, Fernando Tatis Jr. and Ronald Acuna Jr. will be back next year. And you start talking about these international superstars that are coming in and becoming the best players in baseball. And you still have Mike Trout, and he'll be back next year. And, the Rangers here locally, the Rangers just dropped over $500 million on players, and now there's going to be more interest here. And so, like, this is what baseball fans here locally and nationally want. It's a good way to grow the game. And they just got to market their players better, and I believe that it's on the upswing, starting to get that way. And maybe I'm just being optimistic, but that I just want to see the game of baseball just get back to where it's a little bit more relevant in the culture. And let's just get the lockout over with. Just get it done in enough time, get the CBA done in enough time so we can start spring training on time. And
let's have a Merry Christmas. Let's have a Merry Christmas. A good start to the new year. I think we all need a refreshing start to the new year. Speaking of that $500 million spending, intriguing, wasn't it? To be honest with you, Chris, did you really think, I know we had talked about, like, between the shortstop class of Semien, Seager, Correa, Story, etc., they were gonna get one. I think we were all in agreement that they were gonna get one. But did you envision that they would get Seager and, I know you said Correa, and I think I was on the Seager train, but to have a complimentary like Semien on the roster too?
Well, Correa, like, I was on the Correa bus because, like, that's who I was like, if I'm the one making the decision,
right?
Correa is the guy who I'm writing the blank check for. Now, I mean, we kind of learned afterward that they didn't even meet with Correa.
Right.
They may have talked, like, with his representation and everything like that, but having that in-person meeting,
there's no traction.
They didn't even have it. So, if it was just like a situation where they're like, okay. And listen, credit to Buster Olney of ESPN, because he said early on that there were some rival evaluators who were concerned that the Rangers were going to double dip in the shortstop market. And that's exactly what happened. Now, yes, I did think that they were going to get somebody, and I still thought the most likely name was going to be Trevor Story. And you have the hometown ties and everything, but I was also looking at what it would have cost to sign him. Just all those factors that weighed in, the fact that I knew that they were interested, just all those factors that weighed in. I was like, okay, he's probably the most likely candidate. But I did think the second most likely candidate was Corey Seager, just because I knew Chris Woodward was going to be I had multiple sources telling me that Chris Woodward wanted him more than anybody else. That was kind of a given. I mean, we kind of knew that was going to be the case just because he was obviously with Corey in LA for 3 years, and he's been able to see how he is on and off the field firsthand. So I thought that, okay, if they really make a push for anybody, it could be a guy that Chris Woodward really, really wants. So I did think they were going to get one. Getting two, I was very skeptical about that, just because, like, if they were to sign a Corey Seager and by himself, it was going to take $300 million to do it. And I'm like, okay, that would be the biggest contract this franchise has ever given out, like even bigger than the A-Rod contract. And, like, the fact that they would possibly give out two, like a really big one, and then like a
10-year and a 7-year one.
Yeah. And I was just like, that would mean spending over $500 million. And that would be something unprecedented. And they did it. I mean, they did something that no team in baseball has ever done. In spending the amount of money that they've spent so far. And so, yeah, $325 million to Corey Seager, $175 million to Marcus Semien, and they're not done. And well, I don't even want to take away from the fact that they added John Gray to the rotation, who's a high floor addition, who could end up like a borderline top of the rotation type pitcher in Globe Life Field. So, and then the fact that they're still looking to add another starting pitcher and potentially another outfielder. So they're not even done spending money. It's just like once this lockout's over, they figure out, what's going to happen. They'll probably have a much clearer picture on where Clayton Kershaw is, where his health stands, and what he wants to do. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens after. But the days leading up to the lockout, with them spending the amount of money that they spent, yeah, I didn't see that. I knew they were going to spend money. I didn't think that they were going to spend the level that they've spent.
I think with the Seager situation, the only roadblock that I saw was somewhat maybe being outbid by a Dodgers or by Yankees. But from what it was nationally was sent out, it wasn't even close. Like,
So
the Dodgers counter wasn't even all that close.
Yeah, and I know, and like I understand having the "I'll believe it till I see it," scenario with the Yankees. Like, oh, the Yankees aren't going to spend money. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, I get it, because the Yankees have historically just spent money. But I know Bob Nightingale gets a bad rap on Twitter. Like, I get it, but he even reported, I think before the season even ended, I can't remember when exactly, but it was either before the season ended or it was like during the postseason, where he reported saying the Yankees were not going to be major players in the free agent market. And it was because they've got money they have to reserve for Aaron Judge.
Yep.
They've got money that they've got to still reserve for whenever they want to extend some of their own internal players. They already have Garrett Cole signed to a gigantic contract. I mean, you can't have, $200 to $300 million spent on every position on the field. You just can't. Nobody has that kind of money. So it's like, what do? Do you fork out $300 million on Corey Seager or Carlos Correa and then take a chance of Aaron Judge walking? I don't think the Yankees really want to risk that. Aaron Judge is a homegrown guy. You get him. He's really popular in the Bronx. Like, you have to be able to reserve the money that he's going to require, and it's going to require a lot of money to keep him. So the Yankees then, and plus they have their Anthony Volpe, who's coming up, who's going to be ready in about 2 years. So get a 2-year, stopgap, and then he can come in and take over the reins. And honestly, the Yankees and the Dodgers both are not, yes, they spend money like crazy, but they also understand the value of developing prospects. Look at the Dodgers and the team that they built. Most of that team was built.
Look at the teams they let walk.
Yeah, but it's like, look at all the players that they had that they either acquired before they were major leaguers or that they drafted and developed themselves. It was only until they drafted for Mookie Betts and then signed him to that massive extension, because they can, but they use their trade capital prospects to get Mookie Betts. Max Muncy, Gavin Lux, Corey Seager, Justin Turner, Will Smith, like all these guys, they didn't go out free agent shopping and just throw hundreds of millions of dollars at those guys. They're all guys who came up through the system or were acquired before they were big leaguers. So that is how you build a team. You have to be able to build and have guys who are controllable so you can contend for more than 1 or 2 years. And the Rangers are doing that now. They are adding the big free agent pieces, but they are about to have a big farm system that's about to start producing Josh Young, Cole Winn, next year, Jack Leiter probably. And then you'll start to see Ricky Vanasco, Sam Huff, like all these guys just continue to pour out, and they're going to continue to add to it.
Yep.
And that's that's going to be the way that the Rangers are going to build. And there's no one way to do a rebuild, but like, I'm kind of going from one thing to another, but like you kind of see that you have to spend money, but you can't just throw whatever money you can. And so it's not surprising to me that the Yankees weren't going to be major players. And it won't surprise me if Carlos Correa signs anywhere else other than New York, just because I don't see the Yankees or even the Dodgers probably signing him. I think it's going to be a kind of a I'm even starting to get skeptical and think that there may be a possibility that Carlos Correa goes back to Houston, and I would be kind of shocked about that. But if Houston eventually gets to the point where they're like, you know what, we want to secure shortstop and we'll be willing to commit the money. I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing. The big players, as far as shortstops go, as far as teams go, like you said, with the Yankees situation, Dodgers have Trey Turner. Rangers have already got theirs done. Detroit's already got Javi Baez.
Yep.
So then you kind of go down the list and wonder what teams then make sense.
The team that I would watch out for with Carlos Correa is the Cubs. I would watch out for them because they're kind of also in that rebuildish stage, but they obviously have the payroll flexibility to do it since they got out from under contracts. They could have Carlos Correa to a 10, 11-year deal and have him be their guy that they build around.
Yep.
And so maybe that's what ends up happening. I mean, they have Marcus Stroman now, so like maybe they have a couple nice additions in free agency. So the Cubs are kind of a team to watch out for, I think. Other than that, man, I begin to really kind of wonder like what's going to happen there. But the Rangers taking 2 of them, man, that's huge for the Rangers. It's huge for the fans. It's a huge statement being like, hey, we are 100 lost seasons are not happening anymore.
Same thing with the Yankees. You talk the talk saying, oh, they're not going to spend money in free agency. Oh, I'll see it when I see it. A lot of people said the same thing about, oh, we're going to be spending money this off season. Fans are like, well, we'll see when we see it. There you go.
Well, and that's one thing I remember doing an interview with John Daniels, mid-September. And, I remember asking him like, hey, fans are a little skeptical here about wanting to spend money in free agency. And JD said himself, and I've posted the quote, like not only the story, but on Twitter multiple times. I've been like, JD was like, fans having a, like, I'll believe see it mentality. And he's like, we've got to get the work done. And he admitted to it. He understands. Yeah. He empathized with fans for having that. And here they are, and they've spent more money than any team ever has in the offseason. And so now, and it's really, I'm still seeing somehow the fans be anti JD. I don't know why. I don't know how, but I mean, yeah, that's just part of social media.
Why fans are the way they are. That's the loaded
keyboard
question
warriors.
that nobody.
Keyboard warriors.
You only do what you're used to, apparently. Habits
is what it is. Well, see, that's like become the running joke. Is like now that Chris Young is the GM, it's like, oh, because good things are happening, it's because Chris Young is there. It's not because of JD.
But then if bad things happen with Chris Young at the helm, they're like, oh, that's not Chris Young. That's JD is doing.
The whole thing is that it's a decision-making process, and I don't want to.
It's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't want to take anything away from Chris Young at all. I definitely believe his impact. He's been in this position now for about a year. We might be even coming up like on exactly a year, but because it was in December last year. But he's been in this job for a year, like, and I absolutely believe he has had a major impact on the direction of the organization, on getting Jack Leiter here in the summertime. Jack Leiter spoke openly about Chris Young's impact in that whole situation. So I definitely believe Chris Young, and I still believe that Chris Young has had a major impact in free agent discussions as well, and getting guys like Marcus Semien and Corey Seager to be willing to come to Texas, even though they're coming off a 102 loss season. And it was honesty, it was transparency. And I believe that Chris Young talks to them probably in a very similar way that he talks to us in the media, is that he just shoots straight from the hip. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's like, listen, we got to, he would talk to us whenever, this team is losing a bunch of games. It's like, we got to get better. Like this is not good enough. This is not, we have to get better. And he probably went straight. And Corey Seager and Marcus Semien both said that they were honest and transparent in their discussions. And so I definitely believe Chris Young has had a major impact on this front office. However, let's just not just think that JD is not instrumental in any of this. Like this is a collaborative effort of JD, Chris Young, assistant GMs Ross Fenstermaker and Josh Boyd, and the rest of the front office. Like this is a collective, collaborative effort of all those guys. So yeah, this is it's not one guy running the show. This is a collaborative effort, and the front office deserves a lot of praise for what they've done over the last couple of weeks.
I'm curious, once lockout ends, obviously the targets are going to go to starting pitching and outfield, but specifically, I know we talked about Clayton Kershaw. The way I'm looking from an outfield perspective is, I know I've heard Michael Conforto being one option, Nicholas Castellanos being another option. Are there any other trends that you're seeing?
I still think they're going to be players in the Seiya Suzuki market, just because the Rangers have always been really big players in the Pacific Rim and with Japanese free agents and Korean free agents, all those guys. So like the last time there was a report out about like who the major players were for Suzuki, the Rangers were not listed as one, but I refuse to believe that. I know the Rangers are interested, and I've even heard that Suzuki has at least interest in possibly playing in Texas. Not saying that he only wants to play in Texas, but like that if the Rangers were to make the right offer, he would take it. So I think there's obviously that's going to be a competitive market, because you're talking about a guy who would be controllable, who would be cheaper than your Castellanos or Conforto, and plus Castellanos comes with a qualifying offer, and the Rangers have already surrendered 2 draft picks by signing Seager and Simeon. So I have a hard time believing that they're going to go with Castellanos, or that they're going to try to go hard after Castellanos, because that would mean more, unless somehow the new CBA prevents them from having to forfeit any further draft picks, even though the qualifying offer was offered before. Unless the new CBA specifically says that the Rangers don't have to surrender any more draft picks, then maybe they go after Castellanos, because I know that they were interested in Castellanos 2 years ago when he was a free agent. So I maybe, but I until we know that for sure, I have a hard time thinking they'll go after Castellanos, just because there is that, as of right now, that we think potential loss of another draft pick, and I don't think the Rangers would do that. But Suzuki is a name that I'm really interested in, just because that just kind of fits what the Rangers do in the outfield.
So as far as starting pitchers go, when Clayton Kershaw is obviously one, are there any other starting pitchers that you've heard?
The only ones that I know that the Rangers have at least shown interest in would not be free agent. It would be trade. It's a trio of pitchers from Cincinnati: Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, and Tyler Mahle. I can't. Names are
Tyler Mahle sounds familiar. Yeah. I want to say yes.
I just it's kind of like embarrassing that it's coming off, but I'm also running off of the fact that I woke up like just over an hour ago. So
the lockout.
Tyler Mahle. But I mean, and actually Mahle is the one who's coming off the best season of those 3. I think he was, I just pulled it up. He was 4.9 B WAR last year. Went 13-6 with a 3.75 ERA. So he had a really solid year last year. Obviously, we know what Luis Castillo is capable of, and then Sonny Gray kind of fits like that veteran pitcher that the Rangers could want to look for. I think all of them become free agents. All of them have the same amount of time to free agency, and Mahle becomes a free agent after the 2023 season. So I think all of them are under control through 23. So if the Rangers were to acquire like a Castillo or a Mahle, I would think that the same thing with like any other potential trades. Like I know the name Matt Olson's been thrown out. Any kind of trade for a player, especially a younger player, it would probably want to be like, okay, we're going to trade and then we're going to try to sign him to an extension, because it doesn't make any sense at this point unless you're able to give away almost nothing. And when I say almost nothing, I mean like nothing from the real core of your farm system for a Sonny Gray. Like if you're able to part with nothing with that nothing
for 1
hurts,
year.
Yeah, nothing that hurts like the depth of your free agent or of your farm system or anything like that, and you can acquire Sonny Gray, then yeah, absolutely do it, because that gives you some veteran leadership for your rotation for the next 2 years, and then you're good to go. But if you're talking about acquiring a Tyler Mahle or Luis Castillo, that's going to require more trade capital, which would then affect your farm system. So then you better acquire, then sign to an extension so that trade, because the Rangers aren't probably going to be contenders in 2022.
Exactly.
So you need to make moves for beyond next
2023
year.
going forward.
And so if you acquire a Luis Castillo or Tyler Mahle, it's probably going to be okay again, or Matt Olson, because I know that's becoming a really, really popular trend among Rangers fans, and for good reason. But if you make that acquisition, you have to then acquire, then sign to an extension so that trade ends up becoming worth it.
It's so weird to think about, because wasn't it, and we talked about a year ago, Chris Young, when Nathaniel Lowe acquired like a year ago to this date, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It feels like 5 years ago.
Well, it's fun. Well, it's funny because because now Nathaniel Lowe feels like he is a
veteran on the team.
Well, he's the core of the team now.
Yeah.
Like whether he's whether the Rangers view him as like, okay, he's going to be a core guy of a championship team here, that is to be determined. And so if the Rangers then, and the fact that they've already reached out, Evan Grant reported it, that they've already reached out to the A's to see what it would require to acquire Matt Olson. And I would think Nathaniel Lowe would have to be a part of that trade.
Yeah.
And he kind of goes right in the Oakland A wheelhouse. Yeah. He's young, he's controllable for 5 years, and he's a high on base guy. That kind of, and he's projectable. So that kind of goes right down right into the Oakland
money wise,
wheelhouse.
it's cheap too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, because he's
not breaking the bank.
Well, he's still 2 more years. Now, again, the new CBA will determine a lot of this. But exactly. The way the old system was, he would have 2 more years of pre-arbitration, then 3 years of arbitration. So, and really, arbitration doesn't get really expensive unless he just becomes a superstar player. Arbitration doesn't become really expensive until the final year. And so then you're looking at 4 years of cheap and controllable, and then 1 final year of like, okay, now he's going to cost some money. And if by that point he's a superstar, then the Oakland A's got something good out of the Matt Olson trade, if that's something like that were to happen. From the Rangers' perspective, if they can acquire a player like Matt Olson, who is established, they know what they're getting. You're getting a Gold Glove caliber defender. You're getting a guy who can hit home runs and who can slug and who can get on base, and just you're getting a really good 2-way player, like really one of the best 2-way players in the game. You're getting something that is, you don't like to say, I don't like the term sure thing being thrown around in baseball is not great, but you're getting as an established a player as you possibly could for a 27-year-old. And Nathaniel Lowe is, you still don't know. You still don't know what you're going to get. I think he could become a really good player. Like I really do. I saw enough signs last year where I'm like, man, this guy could become a really good hitting first baseman. I think he's probably going to become maybe an average defender at best, maybe above average. He's athletic enough to do that. But he could become a really good hitter if he hits the ball in the air more often. But you still don't know. At least with Matt Olson, you know what you're getting. It's going to cost more money. And so that's why if you can part with Nathaniel Lowe, your middle infield is now taken care of. So if you can build a trade package around Nathaniel Lowe and like Justin Foscue, and then see what you can do with the Oakland A's for a possible trade, then why not do it? Because he's controllable for 2 more years. And then you're looking at signing him to extension. Now your 3/4 of your infield are now locked up, and then third base is the only hole, and Josh Young is supposed to be the guy that takes over for that.
And so, yeah, I mean, all you're just waiting on is whether or not when Young's ready, and that's basically it. You have the guy,
and if he hits, I mean, because as good of a prospect as Josh Young is right now, and he's one of the best prospects in the game, he still has to be able to prove it at the big league level, as we've all seen before. Because Jurickson Profar was once the number 1 prospect in all of baseball, and he's just never lived up to the hype. So, and to be fair, he also dealt with some horrible injury luck. But still, like you don't know. You don't know until a player comes up, and it's the same we just talked about with Nathaniel Lowe. You still don't know. As much as we, either as reporters, as analysts, as fans, whatever, like to look at Josh Young and think he's the third baseman for the next 6-7 years. You still don't know. until he actually goes to the big leagues and proves it. Now he's going to be going into a much better situation since he's going to be playing alongside Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, and they can help show him the ropes, and he can learn how to become a big leaguer in a better environment than any of the Rangers had last year. But you still don't know until he proves it. You still don't know. That's the gamble with any prospect. And that's why if you're a Rangers fan, you look at, oh my God, we're gonna have the best rotation in baseball in 5 years. We're gonna have Cole Winn and Jack Leiter and Ricky Vanasco. Like, man, if one of those guys hits, it's a success. If two of those guys hit, the Rangers are doing something that like few baseball teams ever do. Just because the percentages of prospects that you hit on is low. And so you just hope to hit on as many as you possibly can, and we'll see.
Go back to the 2023 headed monster that was supposed to hit.
Well, and you know what? It could.
That's the thing, you don't know.
Yeah, it could, and it could happen. The Rangers could hit on all three.
Yeah,
they could hit on Winn, Leiter, and Vanasco, and then all of a sudden they have a controllable rotation for more than half a decade, and then you can add free agents to it to make it one of the best rotations in baseball. I mean, that's just, and then it's also like, how do they hit? Like, do they hit where they project? Because then Jack Leiter and Cole Winn are both projected to be like top of the rotation type arms. And so Ricky Vanasco also has that projectability because he has nasty stuff. Yep. So it's like, how do they hit? Like, does Ricky Vanasco become a really good number 3? Or does Jack Leiter does he become like a really solid middle of the rotation pitcher, but doesn't become the ace that so many people think? You don't know how like any prospect is going to play out. So I think the beauty is that minor league baseball is still on tack to start. So unlike 2020, where there was no minor league baseball, at least whenever this whole lockout ends, that minor league baseball is still on track so that you can still develop. Because I know 2020 development really hurt all organizations. Yeah, I mean, because you would probably have seen Josh Young in the big leagues last year, if there were a minor league season in 2020. So the COVID pandemic absolutely affected, I mean, not only the Rangers but every organization in baseball, because Josh Young like kind of fit like that timeline of like, okay, get drafted, probably play a full season in the minor leagues, and then like the following year, if everything goes right, probably start in the minor leagues, but then end up being called up like maybe around June. And so that's why I'm thinking, like, for so many people that think that Josh Young is going to be the opening day third baseman, and to be fair, because I've had like so many people be like, what do you mean? I do think Josh Young will be the opening day third baseman as of right now. However, if the Rangers decide, let's not rush him, let's just give him a couple more months at AAA just to make sure that he's good to go. I mean, I totally understand that as well.
See, I'm on the other side too. I projected like Memorial Day of 2022, assuming everything goes, because I feel like, again, they're not looking to be competitive in 2022. Let's make sure 100%, even if it's 95%. Let's just not rush it. Yeah, you don't want them to the last thing the Rangers want to do is rush prospects, because they've had a history of doing that too often, and you would rather a prospect be absolutely ready and just absolutely make sure before you call them up, because the thing is that there's only so much that a player can do at AAA. I witnessed, as a Pirates fan, I witnessed it with Tyler Glasnow. He pitched along the line at every single level of the minor leagues, but he would get to the big leagues and something wouldn't work out, and then he would go back down to AAA and he'd just tear it up again, and he'd go back to the big leagues and he would just kind of struggle with the same stuff. And that was obviously the Pirates' inability to get him to get to the big league level, because then he's traded to Tampa Bay and becomes one of the best pitchers in baseball. So that's just a indictment on the Pirates' ability to develop young pitching. We had to get one of those in today.
Well, but it's a good example of like, hey, you can look at what Josh Young is doing, what he did in the minor leagues, and be like,
that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Curtis Terry.
Because Josh Young could be, he's a first round pick. 8th overall. He's hit along the line everywhere, so far. He hit along the line in AA. He hit along the line in AAA last year, and he could go to the big leagues next year, and it just doesn't click with him right away. And so, but then he could go back down to AAA, and then he could just rake again. You don't know until you get inside the head of a baseball player, which you can't. I mean, you could try as much as you can, but ultimately you cannot fully get inside that player's head. And this is why baseball is such a beautiful game, because sometimes some of the best players don't develop, and sometimes some of the players that everybody overlooks become some of the best players the game's ever seen. That's the beauty of the game. And so obviously with Josh Young, the Rangers want him to succeed because they do view him as their third baseman for the next, more than half decade. They just need to make sure they do everything in their power to make sure that he's ready. And I do think that he's going to have a really great support system. And I do think he's going to end up becoming a very good big league player.
And I do see going into spring training, when now you have a lot of focus on, you already know shortstop, you already know second base. I would assume Adolis Garcia, based on his 2021 season, I don't want to say is a lock, but is as most of a lock as anybody else that was on that roster, along with Taylor Hearn and Dane Dunning, as far as in the starting rotation. So you don't have as many question marks as far as roster spots go as last year, where pretty much every single 26 man
other than shortstop it was pretty much a crapshoot. I mean, we had Rugen Odor playing third base. Everybody remember that? Remember Rugen Odor playing third base? Like that was a storyline in spring training last year. So it was just it's definitely going to be a little bit more solidified, at certain positions. And even Adolis Garcia, I think right now you kind of project him in center field, based off of the addition of Cole Calhoun, and he's going to be playing right field, more than likely. And then, with Willie Calhoun, does he come in and play left field, or does he form a platoon over in left? What happens there? But I mean,
and do you do
depends.
a DH by committee too, or are they going to have a set DH?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that depends on what do the Rangers do in free agency once the lockout is over. Does the new CBA prevent the Rangers from having to forfeit any further draft picks? And because of that, they do sign a Nicholas Castellanos. And now, okay, do you just commit him to being a full-time DH, and now you then form a platoon in left field, or does Willie Calhoun become your everyday left fielder and Adolis Garcia become your everyday center fielder? And now, or do they sign Suzuki, or do they sign no outfielder? Do they just get outbid on every other outfielder, and they aren't able to add anymore?
What you got.
And then maybe Nick Solak earns at bats in the outfield. You have a lot of different scenarios that can play out. But yes, I do think that, you're a lot more solidified as of right now. Really, your only position battle in the infield is at third base. And that would be like, does Josh Young earn the third base job, or is Isaiah Kiner-Falefa still a Ranger? Is he traded? Or if he's still a Ranger, does he come in and kind of project to be the opening day third baseman, because the Rangers just want to make sure that Josh Young is ready? Catcher as of right now is pretty locked down with Trevino and Heim. So it's a lot more solidified. Obviously the pitching side, you have still some answers. I mean, Dane Dunning and Taylor Hearn are probably the closest to locks, but even then those guys still they still have to prove it and to earn it. I would be shocked if both of those guys are not in the rotation. So I still think that you can, I don't want to call them 100% locks, but they're as close to locks without being locks.
99.8%.
Yeah. So right now your rotation locks are John Gray, Dane Dunning, Taylor Hearn, and then you're like, okay, after that, then you start to look at, okay, you got Spencer Howard, you have AJ Alexy, you have Glenn Otto, you have Colby Allard. Like you've got like that. That's when you start getting.
Assuming you don't get any free agency.
Right. And if you sign Clayton Kershaw, like now you're looking, okay, now you have four signed, so now you've got like four guys all, competing for one spot in the rotation. Or does a guy like Spencer Howard and AJ Alexy both come into spring training and just completely outpitched, either Dunning or Hearn, and then they take over one of their spots? Like it's just like, and that would be the best thing for the Rangers, is to have too much pitching, because you can never have too much pitching.
Nope.
So so that would be the best case scenario for the Rangers if they were to sign another starting pitcher. And now they have a group of 8 or 9 guys that they can all choose from, that they can all rely on to be able to take the ball and give them a quality start. And that is exactly what you want in terms of depth with the starting pitching. And then
And you look at the bullpen too.
You're going to eventually get back Jonathan Hernandez and Jose
Yep.
Leclerc. Those will be 2 huge additions to the bullpen because now once those 2 guys are back into that bullpen's looking pretty good with
Think about
some
that
controllable
combination.
arms.
Barlow,
Well,
Hernandez, and Leclerc. If that's your trio,
don't-
everything
no-
works out.
Nick Snyder too. Don't write off
Nick
Nick
Snyder.
Snyder because give him a full spring training to work. And man, Nick Snyder, man, that guy, man, it's getting exciting. And see, but that's exactly what the Rangers want. They've historically, at least under John Daniels, have not added big league or big money guys in the bullpen. Joe Nathan's really the only exception to that. And so they typically always want to build the bullpen with internal arms. And once you get back Jonathan Hernandez and Jose Leclerc, it's like, okay, now you're starting looking at 4 guys who can all pitch in high leverage situations. And yeah, that can end up becoming pretty exciting for the Rangers.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fun.
No, that's it's 2022 is looking a lot better. For fans, I don't want to get your hopes up too much. I still think at best, as of right now, at best, they're about 75 to 78. Yeah, 75 to maybe 78 wins. Because I don't want to lowball them too much because like they won 78 games in 2019 with, in my opinion, on paper is a worse roster than what they have now. On paper. So I mean, I don't want to lowball them, but they are still coming off a 60-win season. But it's also going to be a much different roster. So you can't. It's hard to say, oh, they got to improve by this. Well, it's because they've drastically improved their roster already based off of what it was last year. So, but I still think 75 wins is a pretty decent barometer. If they were to add a starting pitcher and they're able to add an outfielder, then yeah, maybe they're about a 500 team. And then once they make more additions next winter, then you start looking at the Rangers being an actual contender. So 2022, still an exciting year. Still go watch because it's obviously going to be a lot more exciting to have, a duo like Simeon and Seager up the middle. But yeah, don't think World Series. Don't get out your claw and antlers shirts and hats just yet. It's not quite that time for Arlington to be buzzing about World Series yet, but hey, you know what? With the way this coaching staff is, with the way this leadership is, with Chris Woodward and Donnie Ecker and Chris Young and all these guys, like, man, they want to win. I don't want to put a ceiling on them.
I'm looking at the first half. I mean, the first half before the All-Star break and who they have to early on. If they can somewhat be a little competitive, I feel like their first half of the season is much more brutal than the second half when you look at some of their opponents. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be intriguing, especially starting off the season against the Yankees. And you've got, before the All-Star break, you play the Yankees both times. You get the Braves, you get the Phillies. Philadelphia is kind of in that up and down. But I will say this, is that also offensively, if they could show much more offensively than they did it in 2021, I feel like that was the pain spot. Pitching, I would say the pitching, especially bullpen, was really good. Starting pitching had its ups and downs. But if you can survive on the starting pitching and the relief pitching that they had last year and improve the offense, 75, 76, and maybe even squeak out a couple wins, maybe even get to 80.
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to put a ceiling on them because, I don't think anybody thought the 74 Rangers were going to pull off a 27-win swing. Which is what the 74 turnaround gang did. And it's one of the reasons why one of the dimensions in Globe Life Field is 374 feet, is because as an ode to that team that pulled off a 27-win swing. And I'm not saying that the 2022 Rangers,
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either.
But who knows?
But that's the thing about baseball, is that you don't know. What if, best case scenario here, Simeon and Seager are exactly who they are, and then Josh Young does come in and takes the league by storm, or Nathaniel Lowe, if he's still on the team, comes in and he just absolutely becomes like the really great hitter that he could possibly become, whatever, or Adolis Garcia is able to figure out, or is able to control the strike zone a lot better, and he becomes, something like that happens, and now all of a sudden the Rangers are a much more formidable foe. Or they hit on more players than initially expected, and so you don't know, and that's the great thing. But what you do know is that the 2022 Rangers just become way more interesting than they were a couple weeks ago, and so that's what's exciting for fans, and not only for next year but for future years as well, whenever this farm system continues to produce some of its most exciting prospects.
The lockout end? No, it's not end. We'll have to wait. Oh my goodness.
Oh boy.
Hopefully, as we said earlier, things will get taken care of in at least the next couple months, and this will all be just one distant memory.
I think December, you're going to see the most amount of mudslinging in December between the league and between the owners and the players. That's when you're going to see the most amount of mudslinging, and then in January you might start to see some actual progress. And like I said, I still think they have a deal done by the first week of February. That's my initial gut feeling. That's what I feel based off of people I've talked to. I still think first week of February comes, they get a deal done, and then spring training is either a full go or maybe they have to cut it by a week. But I still think
Cut it by a week.
But either way, you get a full 162 game season, which is what everybody wants, starting on time. We want that opening day against the Yankees to happen. So I think we're going to get it. I'm an optimist, but I still think we're going to end up getting it. So
I like your gut feeling.
I hope I'm right. What I really want to happen, because my family's going to Disney, and whenever I get back, like I think it's January 3rd or January 4th, like the day after I get back, strike a deal then. That way I get back from vacation, then I can then
they'll do it a few days before just
I'm gonna be riding Space Mountain with my son, and then I'm gonna get an alert on my phone. Deal done between the league and the players.
Splash Mountain. Don't they take photos before you go down? I can just see it. Your phone going off. Lockout has ended. They take the photo right on Splash Mountain.
That'd be great. Or like I'm in the middle of teeing off on the Magnolia course, and then like I get a notification from Jeff Passan, Jeff Passan's Twitter that they've struck a deal. I don't know. We'll see. That'd be great.
I'll hear your scream on the west
all
side.
The way from Florida. All the way from Florida. Yeah.
Well, if you want to follow Chris and on the lockout journey to the ending, where can they find you?
On Twitter at Chris Halicke, Halicke, and then all of our Rangers coverage is at Sports Illustrated's InsideTheRangers.com. If that's usually easier to remember, but if you want to go the actual route, it's si.com/MLB/Rangers, but you can just type InsideTheRangers.com and it takes you straight to there. Wonderful technology of the internet nowadays. You can do that kind of stuff. So, but that's where all of the Rangers coverage is. But I'm also on Twitter, pretty active on Twitter. So you can follow me at Chris Halicke. You can also like us on Facebook, like the page on Facebook. And that's, I think that what's the Twitter handle or the handle for that? I think it's at SI Texas Rangers. I think is the handle for that. So, but that's where all the work is. That's where all my commentary and opinions are. The good ones and the bad ones, unfortunately. So, but that's where you can find all the work.
We're all human.
Yep.
You can follow me on Twitter at @PlinkTX. Also for Rangers coverage, DallasSportsFanatic.com/Texas-Rangers. For this podcast, it'll be on YouTube. You can also see episodes on Anchor, Apple, Spotify, all of those audio wise, unless again, you want to go to YouTube and see our beautiful little faces. Yeah. Chris, again, hopefully in 2 months, we will be talking about the return of baseball.
Hopefully in 2 months I will be able to book travel to spring training. That's what I'm hoping for. So because I didn't get to go to spring training last year, just because of like COVID and stuff like that, I wasn't able to go to spring training last year. So I just want a normal spring training. Just go.
You missed a lot. Actually, no. I don't know how much you missed. I mean, I was only there for about a week, but
oh man, yeah. I really enjoyed spring training my first year, and I really want to be able to go and just go and cover and do the job that I'm supposed to be doing, and this, the lockout and then COVID and all this stuff. I'm like, man, just let me cover baseball the way I want to cover it. I haven't had a normal season yet. This.
I know that's the interesting thing. Hey,
I've got 2 seasons in the books, and not neither one of them have been normal. Last year was closer, but still neither one.
The season was normal. The season was normal.
The coverage was not. We didn't even have field access until June.
Okay.
And we haven't had clubhouse. I mean, we didn't even get to see the clubhouse until the day after the last day.
The
end of season press conference.
Which is nice, by the way. It's a really nice clubhouse.
Clubhouse is
hyped it up and deservingly hyped up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greatest appreciate it. And for all the Ranger fans waiting for the season, hey, you're just like us. We wanted to start back. Thank you so much for listening.